something that is needed just to be able to connect to others, bring that sense of community, and just, having people connect and share. And Lisa, that's something you've always been phenomenal at, always. And so, as you said, I've known you for over 30 years. I think it's now, because Antoine is 33, so it's been more than 33 years.
So we got to tell the story of how we met.
Okay.
So let me start off and then you tell me what.
You tell a great story.
Okay. So Kim, you and I met when we were both in, I don't even want to say the year. We were both freshmen. We just finished our first semester, first year of college. And I went back to New York to find a job in New York City. And I applied for this job as a security receptionist and a security person in a J.C. Penney building. I remember that on Fifth Avenue. I don't remember what the street was, in the mid 50s. And so I'm sitting there waiting for my interview, and this young lady sitting next to me, and we just struck up a conversation. And we talked about, were both co-eds. We just finished our first year in college, and we were just excited, and we were both interviewing for the same job. I said, I'm in home for the summer, and that's how it is. So that whole summer of 1984 was the summer we met, and we hung out in New York all summer long. I ended up not getting a job. I don't know where you got the job. Neither one of us got that job.
No.
But what struck me very interesting about, she was different from my other friends because she lived in Harlem. I'm a Long Island girl, so I came from Long Island, and she used to roller skate up and down the street like it was nothing. And at that time, this is in the early 80s, Harlem wasn't what it was like. It was before gentrification. So there was quite a bit of street activity going on. And Kim was so oblivious to, she'd be rolling around in her roller skates, jumping over people like the people in the streets, just laid out. You was careless and carefree. And that's what I liked about it. You was a free spirit, and you still are to this day. And that's one of the things I love about you the most, is that you are a free spirit.
Yes. And for Lisa, what I loved about her, she was a talker. And she wasn't afraid to kind of just, put herself out there. And we just connected. And I felt like she was like a sister to me. As a matter of fact, Lisa is actually godmother to my eldest son. Yeah, I have to put that in there.
I could be better in my godmother duties. I
didn't want to say that.
I'll tell him. I wasn't the best. You're young and you just don't know what this is.
His name is Antoine.
Yes,
just in case
Antoine.
Yeah, Antoine.
Yes, my godson.
And so, yes, and so it's been a really long time, and we did lose a little contact for a little bit as life went on. But of course, I found her. Remember, I looked you up, and you were always like, "How on earth did you find me?" I think it was Zillow.
It was Zillow. You found me on Zillow, and I was like, "Oh my God, who finds people on Zillow?"
Her address. It gave me her phone number, and I just called her just out the blue. I was like, "I miss you. I miss us." And so we cracked up. But I think she went back and she changed that Zillow. So I wasn't able to. Nobody else would be able to find you.
Yes, Lord, that was interesting. But everything happens for a reason, and so I'm glad we did reconnect, and it's been just the same. It's been great ever since. So I thought of you immediately when we talked about mental health first aid, because you've been in the mental health care field for a while. Went to NYU and got your master's degree, and so you've been working in this field. And when we talked about what you should talk about, I felt trauma was an important topic, especially in light of what we've been happening in the past year with all this increase in mental health stuff that's going on. And I just felt that trauma is a particularly interesting topic, especially for women.
It is. It absolutely is.
So tell me your story about trauma and how trauma has impacted your own life.
So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of bring it back a little bit and just say, you know what, it's really simple. I came to this space being in, because we call it the helping professions, from my own lived experience of childhood trauma, abuse, and neglect. And I vowed, once I got back into school, to save all the little me's out there. I put on my cape, and I was just ready to just go ahead out and just really save the world.
Wow.
And it started with me being 3 or 4. And then, I just want to just put out there, what we're going to be talking about, it may have some triggering responses. And so for anyone that, it's just too much, or you need to take a break, please feel free to do that. I started this
This week I
journey.
was live on YouTube. I did go live on YouTube.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Just again, having my own trauma experience when I was 3 or 4, being left by my mother, left with a stranger, someone that was a stranger to me, someone that was not of blood relation. My mom had some substance abuse issues, and she felt like she wanted to leave me with this particular person. She didn't come back until I did not come from that situation until I was about 11 years, about 10 and a half years old. And during that time, I endured, not being taken to school. I think I missed about 2 years of school. I was starved. Anytime I tried to sneak out, my hand, the woman would, take my fingers and take them to the burner and put my fingers on the burner. And I'm young. And just a whole host of really horrible things that you would just never do to a child. And it just left me really wondering, what did I do to make her so angry? We're talking, she would have me stand up and stand up for hours and hours at a time. Sometimes I'd have to go to the bathroom. She wouldn't let me go to the bathroom, and urine. I would literally urine on myself. And I remember having these white boots, these little, I think they were kind of cowboy boots, but the urine would seep down into the boots and I couldn't move. I couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't wash up. And the urine, the chemicals in our urine, it started to eat away at my skin. And it was just, again, a lot of emotional, a lot of mental, and a lot of physical abuse. And I just remember being really hungry all the time, my food being salted. And again, as I said, I'm a young child. And as I, came into adulthood, just wondering what would make someone treat me that way. It must have been me, right? It must have been something that I had done. And then I was further traumatized. First of all, that was very traumatizing, very hurtful and painful. And I carried that for several years as I tried to adjust once I came out of that situation. And of course, it impacted my relationships, the way I interacted with others. Sometimes I was clingy, very clingy, because I was worried that people were going to abandon me or leave me. Sometimes I just really acted out in just various ways. But then when I got into my 20s, I don't know what happened. Something hit me and said, well, you can go and ask her. Why is it that you can't talk to her and ask? And I really wanted an answer as to why she did this to me. Unfortunately, she had passed away the year prior. So I really never got that closure. And that was hurtful. And that sat with me for years after that. Why couldn't I make it? Why couldn't I talk to her? And not being able to get any answers. It was really difficult. So yeah, I'm being really transparent here. Sometimes it is a little difficult to talk about, but it's part of my story. It's part of, and some of that has made me who I am today. And that's why I am in this space, because I vowed I was going to go into foster care, because that's exactly what I did after graduate school. And I was going to save all those little me's, because nobody heard me. Nobody heard my cries. Friends, I went to people's houses.
Wow.
And I was sent back home to this abusive woman. In school, you would think, oh, school, now we call child welfare, right? Back then, I smelled, I looked horrible, I was skinny as I don't know what. The school did absolutely nothing. They sent me back.
Wow.
They sent me back home. And
Wow.
so, yeah. And so, yeah, that was years of a trauma. And, sometimes people say, oh, you look like you were born with a silver spoon in your mouth. And I said, but you don't know my story.
Yeah.
Right? Everyone has a story. And so many of us have stories of trauma. And so it's really important that, I know for me, that we talk about that,
Mhm.
to try to make people feel comfortable, because as we walk around not sharing, that resonates, that stays within our bodies, and that has an impact, right? And it comes out in different ways. It could come out behaviorally. It could come out in terms of our mental health, um, suffering from depression, anxiety, failed relationships,
Mhm.
um, being distracted, not being able to be successful in different areas, not being able to really stay focused on goals. So it has all, so many different effects.
Yeah,
So,
I think your story, I love that I knew part of your story. I never knew the whole aspect of it.
oh,
But it does kind of make sense now why we do the things we do as adults is because of the things that we experience as children.
mm-hmm.
Um, Talk about trauma and ways that now we're dealing with and how it impacts our mental health, particularly for women. Where do you think, I mean, trauma shows up in different ways. If it's not in a childhood experience, what other ways can women be traumatized, do you think?
Oh, definitely in relationships, but I just want to point out that a lot of it does stem back from childhood, and there's something called ACEs. It's called it stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences, and
Yes.
it was a study that was done, back in the 90s, where they took, several thousand people, and they started asking about their childhood experiences, and they asked people that were of significant ages, and what they found out was more than 70% of those people had what we call an ACE, and add some type of dysfunction at home or adverse childhood experience. And I'm going to send you the link because it's a little quiz that you can take. And it's like, it's literally 10 questions or 10 categories. They're really 10 questions.
Mm-hmm.
And you go through each one and you give yourself a point if there was something adverse or if you had exposure. And I'm just going to be transparent. My ACE score was an 8.
And what's the maximum you can get?
10. The max is 10. Mine was an 8. The higher your ACE score, the more exposure you've had to trauma, which then puts you at higher risk for physical ailments, health issues. And we're talking heart disease, we're talking, sometimes pulmonary lung disease, obesity, because I think that's where this survey even started from. There was someone that was really obese, and they were trying to figure out like what was happening. And so, yeah, so a lot of it does stem back, but we don't think so. So when we talk about things like, oh, I was beat with an extension cord, right? But I was beat with an extension cord after leaving that really abusive situation, right? Beating with an extension cord, that's harsh, right? For me at the time, I was like, oh, that's just how I was, disciplined. That was discipline. But when you think back at it, that was really harsh. And that had an effect on me moving forward. Um, and so for women, a lot of us, we kind of hold on to these traumas. We deal with whatever is going on in our lives. Sometimes we feel like we don't have a voice. We shouldn't really say anything. We shouldn't talk about it. We shouldn't share our feelings or really, talk to whoever we are with. And we end up in situations that we really don't need to be in, like abusive relationships. And that's really where it really does play out a lot in abusive relationships.
Yeah.
And so building that sense of community with women, talking about what's going on.
Mhm.
I always talk about getting connected to professionals, because I know there's a big stigma in our community about mental health and mental health treatment. And people don't want to go. It's, let's leave it to whoever the higher power is. We may say, well, let God take care of it. Yes, you have God, but then you also have your trained professional who can really just really, help you along. And right now, in this phase of the pandemic, where so many of us are caretakers, right, to so many. And we've had a lot of losses. We've had some significant loss. I've known many women, and even a lot of my younger women, even some of my students have lost parents. They've lost friends, other loved ones. They're scared, and they're still kind of walking with all of this, trying to live, trying to survive, trying to make it, and really not taking care of them, taking care of themselves. And so I can't stress, I know people think self-care, the word self-care is just a cliche. It's just something that we're saying, no, it really is important that we take care of ourselves. And we connect with others. And when I say take care of ourselves, I'm not talking about just going to get your nails done. I'm not, because sometimes people equate it to that, and it's like, no, it's how are you breathing, right? Are you, maybe taking some deep breaths when you're feeling upset or you feel like you're triggered? Are you eating properly? Are you sleeping? Ah, how many of us are staying up like really late, just packing on the responsibilities, and really not getting the proper sleep? Are we drinking our water? Are we exercising? How many of people out there are or are not exercising? We really do need that for sure. Definitely.
Let me ask you a question. How would you know if you have repressed trauma? How do people know if they have repressed trauma and not? Because I mean, I know people think of trauma as the most things like what you describe as beating or even rape and things of that nature. Sometimes trauma may not be that violent or may not be that evasive. How do you? What if somebody says, "Well, I don't think I have trauma,"
Well, trauma
I was when I was younger, I had a switch to my legs, but I never felt it. I never saw it as traumatic, that experience. I think maybe if it was other things that happened in addition to that, I might have thinking the experience, but I always look back on that time as a joke, because in our community, getting a switch when I was growing up was commonplace. Everybody got their legs switched and it hurt, but I never saw that as a traumatic experience.
You know why? Because it's how you respond to the event. And so if you have, let's say, maybe some memories, or you're constantly asking yourself, well, why did that happen? Going back to it, feeling maybe anxious if you see maybe another child get hit or traumatized, right? That means that really had a significant impact on you. Right. And so let's go back a little bit and let's talk about what is trauma. So trauma is an emotional response to a terrible event. It could be like an accident, like a rape, like a natural disaster. But it can be just exposure to something that's really stressful, hurtful, or painful.
Like a car accident.
Right. It could be a car accident, natural disasters. A lot of the big ones are, of course, domestic violence. Even if, your parents are going through a divorce.
Yeah.
How many, of us have had to deal with that? And it really can shatter your sense of security and safety and make you question who you are. And so I think that's really important to know. And you can have one event and two different people, and they have two different responses.
Yeah.
But just because an event happened to you, and I'm going to give you actually an example, and this tends to just resonate with me. And so I'm a New Yorker, as you already said. I was driving along the West Side Highway, kind of enjoying my day. It was myself. I was driving, and I was with a neighbor and my young son. It was Antoine at the time. And so we're driving along, and so I came upon, and I'm flowing with the traffic, so I came upon a little dip where I couldn't really see over it, right? And so I went over the dip, and as I started downward, and it wasn't a big dip either, traffic had stopped, and it was right there. So had I kept going at the speed I was, I would have crashed into the car in front of me. So I slammed on the brakes, of course, as a reflex, spun around and end up on facing oncoming traffic, right? My friend got out. He directed everyone around me. Everyone was safe, right? Of course, I was anxious. I was nervous, a little traumatized. That was that. So my mother had a similar experience. And I think it was at nighttime. It was raining, and she hit the wall a little bit. The side of a wall. She spun around, facing now oncoming traffic. There was no oncoming traffic. So she got herself together and she pulls it around, but she doesn't want to travel in rain. She doesn't want me traveling in the rain. Any, she can have the entire day planned. If it's going to rain, she will shut it all down. She will say, no, 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 don't come. Even on Mother's Day, I was like, oh, Ma, I'm coming. I'm on my way. It's going to rain. It's going to rain. I'm like, Mom, but it's okay. I'm going to be okay. I don't like to travel in the rain. But prior to that event, she wasn't saying that. And kicker, she doesn't drive anymore. She's nervous. Yeah. And this happened years ago,
So she developed a phobia.
So again, exactly. She has some PTSD because of that situation, right? Again, we were in similar situations, but I'm like, yeah, okay. I got back in my car and I started driving. And it was like, man, thank God I'm alive. Like that was really messed up. How can I be so crazy?
Yeah, events are really, I remember 9/11 and my neighbor developed PTSD because she worked down, and I think a lot of people did from that whole experience, especially those who worked in that Wall Street area. And I would just remember my neighbor being very afraid to drive back into Manhattan after that for a long time. And so she developed some PTSD after that. For those who don't know, what does that stand for, the acronym?
Post-traumatic stress disorder. This is when you're having those responses to events that have been really impactful, hurtful, painful, traumatizing.
So when does it become a disorder versus just
when you can't, when it's so intense, the anxiety is so intense that you can't get over it. Like let's go back to the example that I had with my driving. I was able to get over it. Yeah, I screwed up. I messed up. Okay, I almost crashed. Okay, right? My mother wasn't. So for her, it has become PTSD because everything is it's like she remembers this as if it was yesterday. And so that's the difference. That's when it's really intense, and you want to really go and seek out some professional help because again, look how it's impacting her, right? It's stopping her from driving. It's stopping her from life if it's raining. She doesn't want to go out. So she would be a great candidate for someone to really talk about that.
Tell me, how long does it take to heal from from emotional trauma? Does it any particular time? And how do you release those trapped emotions, or give us some examples of how you can release those trapped emotions that people are feeling?
Well, there is really no time frame. Healing is individual. Right. And so again, what works for me may not necessarily work for you, which may not work for the next person. But the first step is really being willing to heal. Sometimes people are so afraid and feel like they are not going to get better that they don't really even give themselves the real opportunity to really try. The next thing is just having that support. Get yourself connected to people that love you and care about you and that genuinely support you. Those that are going to really be your champions. And you want to really surround yourself because for a trauma or PTSD, what's missing is that sense of safety. I don't know if you remember earlier when I talked about your sense of safety is shattered, right? And that's what needs to be repaired. So you need to feel safe. You need to feel good. You need to feel secure in your surroundings, right? And then of course, there's always seeking the assistance from a professional, someone that is trained to do some trauma work. You can do some trauma focused, cognitive behavioral therapy. We call that TFCBT, or some EMDR, eye movement, desensitization, reprocessing. I always mess that word up. And those are specifically focused to help mitigate symptoms of PTSD and any trauma.
What would some of the symptoms be if somebody had repressed trauma? They may not know that they are experiencing.
Maybe some irritability, just maybe just acting out without really being able to understand why. Maybe poor relationships, maybe their ability to connect with others, being mistrustful.
Mhm.
Being fearful every time you turn around, you're fearful of something. But also there could be some triggering responses that can cause you to react. Like, for example, if you were in a situation and there was a certain scent around, and when you smell this scent, it brings back those memories. It could be a certain sound, it could be music, and looking at the response that you have to that. Um, is your heart starting to race? Are your
Mhm.
hands, what are some of the physiological symptoms you're seeing? Maybe your hands are starting to sweat, heart palpitations. Let's see. Yeah,
Wow.
I think those are some of them. Yeah, and when that happens, sometimes it happens and we don't know why. You have to ask yourself, well, why is this happening? What is going on in this particular environment that is causing me to have some fearful feelings?
I one of the things that I want to kind of bring notice to is that trauma can happen to males and females. But I guess since this is mostly a women group, I want to make a note that the difference though would be women are susceptible to certain kind of traumas. Well, I'm not going to say that to be true, but they're more likely to be victimized in areas of domestic violence and sexual abuse. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Because
I
trauma can
would
happen to
agree.
anybody, but
Yes, it
what
can.
am I missing any other type of trauma that women are more likely to be susceptible, or not
A
domestic
lot of
violence susceptible?
relationship, and there could be something called, I don't know if you've heard of trauma bonding.
No.
There could
All
be
right,
some
what is
trauma
that?
bonding. That's where there's a victim and they feel connected to their perpetrator, and they want to see the perpetrator as good. And so they tend to blame themselves for whatever is happening, or they'll say that they're bad. And it's almost like that codependent relationship
That we were talking
that
about.
we were talking about last week. Yeah, that's called trauma bonding.
That
And
happens typically in domestic violence situation, battered
it,
women.
it does.
Yeah.
Usually it's that the control, having that control over the other person. But the person, the victim, is the one that is feeling that they want to remain, like they start to build compassion, they start to have empathy for the perpetrator.
Okay.
And in order to continue to see them as good, they see themselves as bad. And so sometimes people, bond over that. Sometimes people bond from their shared experiences of past traumatic events. Like you might find that with certain groups, like maybe Alcohol Anonymous or maybe NA.
Adult children of alcoholics
Yep,
definitely.
Al-Anon.
Al-Anon, they
Yep.
definitely feel that because they've been exposed to parents who
Mhm.
have
Absolutely. And the question is it love, or is it just we can identify that we have this trauma,
mm-hmm.
as a link, as a way to link us.
um Exposure to certain things too. Let's say for instance you come from a family or a background where there was a lot of arguing going on, a
Of
lot of
course.
dysfunctional behavior, just exposure
Mhm.
to things. I think of they talk about the children in the inner cities that are exposed to violence, or even in the Middle East that are exposed
Mhm.
to violence on a
War,
regular basis,
gang violence,
gang
bullying.
violence.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And there's something, I don't know if you're aware of vicarious trauma.
I've
Just
heard of
even
that. What does that mean?
that's you may not experience it firsthand, but maybe you experience it secondhand. And vicarious trauma even occurs when you're working with someone. I know in the helping professions, a lot of us workers go through something called vicarious trauma, meaning we have clients that are bringing their stuff, they're bringing their issues, they're bringing their trauma, their everything to session. And then we start to feel some of that. We start to share in the emotions that they
What they're
bring,
going through.
that they bring to the table. But some people think it only happens in the helping professions with therapists and social workers. It doesn't. If we can be friends, like matter of fact, I have a friend who her friend's husband just passed away. And I had said to her, how are you feeling? He's, oh, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine. And then a couple of days later, she turned around and said, you know what, I'm really not fine. I said, there's no way you could be fine, because if that's a good friend of yours and you're there, you're in that space, you're hearing what happened, you're hearing her talk, you're hearing her sadness, you're seeing her, of course, you are absorbing some of that. And so that is called either secondary stress trauma or vicarious
Wow.
trauma. So you have to be mindful. And I always tell people, so some people may say, well, oh, but I'm not supposed to be there to help my friend. Of course you are, but you have to help yourself. You have to be able to set a boundary and sometimes give yourself a break and say, you know what, I need a moment. Let me go and take care of myself over here. Because if you don't, then you can't really fully be there and be present for the other person.
Wow, that's
yeah.
I think that when I've heard about trauma, the first time that I really hit me was how people impacted by things that happen in life was I attended an event years ago. It was supposed to be like a sister circle. You know what those sister circles are like, where you just kind of expunge all the things from your past. And somebody asked, the leader actually asked, was there anybody that had any trauma in their past? And I don't know if she jumped on this sexual trauma or not, but one of the stories that the lady shared was that she was molested when she was a child, and it left her so traumatized as an adult that she had her teeth removed.
Oh, wow.
Because she was molested in her mouth as a child.
Oh,
and
wow.
for something about made her want to remove all her teeth.
Well,
I never forget that story. And I it just resonated with me because I couldn't believe that it just hit me.
Wow, that's really deep. But
That
your response could be to get rid of anything
that reminds
you of, or reminds her of, that experience. I want to get rid of it altogether. Of course, taking out your teeth it doesn't make it better. It doesn't make it go away. If anything, it may make her more upset because now she doesn't have her teeth.
But yeah, people, I think we got dentures put in place of
yeah, but depending on what happened, and the question would be, what is the significance of the teeth? You know what I mean? So yeah, that's what happened with that.
That stood out to me, and I was like, yeah. So trauma does, happen. I think my niece, I have a family member that was just in a major car accident recently, and she said to me, she was with her mom, and she said to me, every time she passes that section of the road where they were at, she's jumpy. Of course, it's just natural.
Right.
She's just not able to sleep. She has anxiety. And of course, I'm trying to get her some services to help her, because she has not, she went right back to work. She doesn't have, she went right back to work because she doesn't have resources to take off of work. So it makes me think about women who have been traumatized by something in their life, and we plow through. What is it about us?
Because society says this is what we do. We are usually the gatekeepers of everything and everyone, especially in our families. If something happens to somebody in the family, it's usually the woman that will step up and provide the care, whether we can do it or not. That doesn't even matter. We say yes first and check resources later. Oftentimes we don't really have the resources, but I think that societal kind of expectation, or at least that's the message of the expectation for women, to really do that. And and you hear things like, you're strong, we're resilient, especially for women of color. We always wear that cape, that hat of strength, and we're going to make it happen, and we're going to be on our grind, and we can do it, and blah blah blah. And sometimes it's just exhausting. It's tiring. And the question is, do we always have to be on the grind? Do we always have to be the one? Do we?
No.
But if it's not us, then who?
Then who?
Not us, then who? Exactly. And so there's trauma in so many areas that people may not really think about. So you have, let's say, divorce. I think we mentioned that earlier, divorce, a relation, or just a relationship breakup. Yeah,
Yes.
just the breakup that can be traumatizing. So before, the way trauma was looked at before, it had to be something close to death, right? It had to be a significant loss, a threat to your health and safety. But now it's really expanded and is much broader to almost any experience that causes a strong emotional response.
Response.
Yeah, that's what trauma is now. So even a breakup can be traumatizing. Loss of a job,
Yes.
loss of a job, like that's a big one. Some people
Yes.
don't really think, they wouldn't consider that to be a trauma. I'm like, no, that is traumatizing.
Yeah, I've seen again another family member of mine who many years ago lost a job, and that's what happens when people are really tied to their jobs emotionally and identity wise. When
Mhm.
people are tied to their work and that's taken away from them, that's
Mhm.
traumatic.
Very
That's
traumatic.
that's their identity.
Hmm. Yeah,
And
and that's why I always advocate for people to have hobbies, to have something else going on, because just in case. Lisa, in our era, people were working for the state and the government, and they would work city jobs, and they were on their jobs for 30 plus years, and that changed. So that's no longer. So to me, to put all your eggs, and I'll just use that term, put all your eggs in one basket, to me is not, it's not good. It's not good planning, because anything can happen. Downsizing. Now that sense of loyalty from employers, that's not there. And that what we used to call security, mm-mm, that's not there unless you're doing your own business.
yeah, absolutely.
Unless you're doing it. Oh, so you have losing a job, you have the loss of financial stability, which of course that can come from, loss of employment. Um,
Another one that I for women do, and I didn't think about this when you talked about is I didn't know they call them rainbow moms,
mm,
women who lose children and then have children after. Oh, that's very traumatic. I didn't realize because I just, how traumatic it is when women lose children in stillbirth.
yeah, that is
And
traumatic.
now, do you know how they do it now when they do it? I don't know if they did this years ago, but you know how they do it now if you have a child that's stillborn in the hospitals?
Oh, they go through the ceremony. Yeah, yeah.
That's all for the women to help them ease that
Mhm.
that because that's very traumatic. I went
Very
to a
much so.
memorial service and I cried my eyes out like I've never cried before in my life because I actually they take the footprint of the baby,
Yes.
they take pictures,
Yep.
and it was so sad, and I wasn't even the mom,
Yep.
so that's very so I'm thinking of trauma that women experience that men do not experience because trauma hurts everybody,
It
but there's
does.
certain trauma that men are just not they don't get to touch and that touch women that men don't
Mhm.
have to
Right,
deal with. And again, that
right.
one of them domestic violence, not that men can't be battered too,
Because
but
they
we know
are.
the
Men are
statistics they
battered.
are battered, but the
They are.
statistics are more that women are brutally more than men are.
Hmm.
And then there is the sexual trauma of
Of
childhood
course.
and even in adulthood and rape and
Mhm.
all this other stuff that women go through that men just don't are not touched the way when it comes to trauma like that.
Right, it's true. But what I like to say is that we all, like, one trauma is not bigger or greater than another trauma, because trauma is trauma. And it can have significant impacts on both men and women. And so since you brought that trauma up about that, because I was actually going to mention miscarriage as one of the things that I knew that was very traumatizing. But what about being a man of color right now, being an African American man, just trying to live in today's world? I mean, so
That's true.
let's say somebody, he just happens to maybe run a red light. So it's not, for our Black men, it's not just run a red light. It's, oh my God, am I going to make it through? Am I going to come out of this alive? Okay, where do I put my hands? Where is my license? Where do I have to go in my glove compartment? Are they going to think I'm grabbing maybe a weapon or a gun? And I honestly, I don't really fully know the impact of that. I only know, based on the vicarious trauma, right? Because sometimes I do cry. we have people like, of course, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and those situations, very, very traumatizing, very, very traumatic. But for our Black men, just walking around, the fear that they may feel, for sure. And the issue with men is that they don't really talk about it, because remember, now we go back to society's messages. Men are strong, you're macho, you don't talk about these things, you don't feel. But this is why some of our men are harboring these feelings of sadness and anger and frustration, because where do they put it? Where do they take it?
Or if they're not showing it that way, is it sometimes, Kim, where they're disconnected and they come across in a way that's not totally here? They're like socially
disconnected, numb,
disconnected.
maybe numb. Yeah, they can be numb, but that happens for men and women. You can maybe just be disconnected from it. Pull away. If you're married, you can pull away from your spouse or your partner. You can feel, just put that just separation there, and that feeling of distance.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really challenging.
It is. It's right. But I'm glad that we're more informed about it, and we're learning, and we're talking about it more. Rosa, you've been so quiet, and you're usually never that quiet I know it's a deep, heavy topic. Do you have a question or a statement or your take on it?
I often wonder, someone who's experienced trauma, why do they then commit the same trauma in their lives with other people?
That's a good question.
Oftentimes it's a learned behavior, because there is something, it depends. Again, I'm going to bring it back to childhood. Depending on what you've learned about relationships and love and what love looks like, really determines how that plays out in your life. And so, for example, if you saw a mom hit dad, or well, it's usually vice versa, but mom can hit dad too, right? And you saw
my mom did.
Right? I'm not even gonna just act like it's men hitting women, but no, women hit men as well. But if that's what I saw growing up, I'm getting these messages from my parents. They're my first role models on love, relationships, and how to handle situations. Oh, well, mom used to hit dad, or dad used to hit mom, and they were still together. Okay, well, this is what then it's supposed to look like. This is what it's supposed to be. So when I get with David and he hits me, oh, guess what? He loves me, because he's taken the time to get riled up, to get worked up. He's right. And so look at how I'm looking at that. Oh, he does love me, because if he didn't love me, he wouldn't bother. He wouldn't even care. He does care. And so with domestic violence, they say it usually takes about 7 times of a woman going back. Sometimes women don't make it out, or I'll say people don't make it out. I really don't know the statistics for men, but I know it's always for women, usually around 7 and a half times. And so, sometimes it's a hard lesson to learn. Sometimes it takes a person that they feel a sense of trust with, that they feel can really help them out of a situation. Sometimes not.
And then we talk about how our culture does not like the term therapy. So what are other alternatives? And I may have missed it, because I had a call I had to take. I may have missed it if you went over that. But, what are some, because I think even myself, I don't really like that term, going to a therapist.
Mm-hmm.
What does that evoke when you think?
I was just going to ask you, Rosa, what does that mean for you when you say therapist?
It means that I have to go talk to someone and share.
You froze. She froze.
Oh, she was right in the middle of something.
I know, she was saying it and she froze. She was like,
Well, she's right.
Gotta look-
Rosa, I hope you come back, but I pretty much know where you're going.
Yeah, I know. It's the same
Yeah,
too.
it's been a huge stigma, and that's been passed down. We don't talk to people. We don't share our business. We keep the secrets in the family. That's what you're taught. Generationally, we've been taught that. You don't go, you run in your mouth.
Telling our business.
Telling
Telling
our
family
business. Keep that right in the family. But we all know some of those family secrets are really hurtful and painful and
Yes.
really, really traumatic.
Traumatic. Yep.
Very, very traumatic. And so for me, I use things like, well, just get maybe some extra assistance to work through that situation. Because my goal is always to get the person there, to get them in front of the helping professional. And so I may not say therapy. I may say just extra support. Hey, you know what? That's a really tough thing you're going through. It sounds like you need some extra support. Right.
And I think I like that term because I would think in terms of a support group. I like that so much more than going to a therapist.
Well, I was going to say, if you can't get somebody in front of a therapist, at least a support group. But here's the difference.
Yeah.
And people don't really understand the difference. This is my version, and Kim can tell because she's a therapist. Support group is peer support. They're not there to help you work through problems. They're there to support you as you're going through the problem. A professional will help dig deeper into helping you resolve the problem.
Absolutely. And a professional will know how to close things up. Because, for example, we may start talking about something. Let's say you and I are friends. We start talking about something. Now you're having a breakdown. You're having an emotional outburst. I don't know what to do to close it up. Right? As a therapist, I know what to do. I know if I have maybe 10 minutes left to talk to you, there are certain things I'm not going to open up. I'm going to wait maybe for next session. And I'm going to know how to support you and guide you and pretty much know what to say. Because when you leave my office, you have to be okay. So, and your friends, a lot of them are going through the same thing or have been through the same thing or have not, and they may not know how to help or give you that extra support you need to really help with the healing process. Because remember, when you're dealing with trauma, it's really about the healing. And so if you don't want to necessarily say therapist, don't say therapist. Just say, I'm going to get some extra support.
Emotional healer. I like
that. You can say emotional healer. You can say healer. You can say, again, support to me is so broad. It encompasses so much. If you have a pastor, if you have, someone that maybe does some counseling in the church, or, in that capacity, I would say that. But just surrounding yourself by people that can really be supportive and that love you and that are not going to judge if you say, I want to go to a therapist. You don't want anyone to say, oh, why would you want to do that? No, that's
we have to get past those learned behaviors we've had.
Absolutely. And that's what it is. It's learned behaviors.
It's what that looks like. And I'm so glad that we've taken that stigma out of mental health. Because more and more I'm speaking to people who struggle with it for many, many years. And that it's like coming out of darkness. I call them suffering in silence for many years. And so now people are very vocal. A lot of celebrities are on television telling them, I struggle with, and so this is a good thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It doesn't need to be a secret anymore. To me, we're supposed to be evolving. We're supposed to be better and get better because we want to be able to help those around us also. And therapy is, and again, sometimes people think, oh, I go to a therapist, I had this bad experience, I'm not going to go back. Well, therapy is all about connection also. Maybe you didn't feel connected to the therapist. Okay, so then you would try
a different one.
A different one.
Yeah, one size does not fit all. I have to say that.
Not at all.
Make sure you find the right.
At all. I mean, if you found a therapist that didn't know any therapeutic methods, but you have a good relationship with that therapist, I would say stay with that therapist.
That's a life coach.
Sure. I would say also, some people don't.
So yeah, some people will go to life coaches too. And I'm a mental health coach. So if anybody's looking for a mental health coach, I'm available. Kim, in the last 2 minutes, as we wrap up, what practical tips do you want to share with everybody on either trauma or mental health Oh, self-care, whatever, therapy, what would you?
It's just self-care. We are of the age of taking care of yourself. Like
Mhm.
it has to be about self-care. And at first I was like, oh, I'm not gonna say self-care. I have to say self-care because that's where the healing begins. You have to begin to put yourself as a priority because if you see yourself as worthy and
Yes.
as important, um,
Yeah.
you believe in yourself,
Yeah.
it's less likely that you will get into abusive relationships because guess what? You value
Mhm.
yourself. You are important.
Exactly.
You're not going to allow people to talk to you a
Mhm.
certain way, treat you a
Mhm.
certain way, and do certain things. And I think that's really important. Getting enough sleep. I was talking about this earlier. A lot of us are not, sleeping. We're staying up all night. We're, maybe watching TV. You need your sleep because that's how your body is able to really refresh itself.
Mhm.
And it's really just about self-care, getting with a group of people or someone that you trust, that you
Right.
can have that good relationship with, that is supportive of
Yeah.
you and enjoy life. I'm a lifelong learner and I've been through many situations. I think Lisa's having something else where she said, Kim, I want you to come back and talk about that. Um, I'm just like, I'm not gonna let anybody steal my joy. I'm not. I
Mhm.
want to enjoy. I have a whole life out here. So those relationships did not work out for whatever reason. Okay, but guess what? I'm still here. And I'm still going to live life to the absolute fullest. And I encourage people to do that.
Yeah. And Kim, I'm dealing with a situation with a dear friend
Mhm.
who was in an abusive relationship, and her husband had been incarcerated for 4 years for fighting with her. And then 2 Sundays ago, he beat her to death with a bat. Spent 4 years in jail, and then
Oh,
he got
wow.
out and came back. And we as friends did miss certain signals because I'm now finding out that she did tell people she feared for her life, but he had such control over her mind
Mm-hmm.
that she did feel unworthy.
Mm-hmm.
He
Mm-hmm.
preyed on that. And
Yep.
then she had a poor relationship with her sister and mother.
Yep.
So that there again, he was able to get in.
Yep.
And she really didn't share a lot with the girlfriends. So we didn't really know what she was going through.
Mm-hmm. She was keeping it a secret.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I'm
Which
so
is
sorry.
typical. Which is so typical.
It is. I'm so sorry, Rosa, that you've had that
Mm-hmm.
experience.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
I really am. And it's hard.
Oh
It's really
yeah.
hard. And that's why having a network is really, really important. It really is.
Yeah. So
So
if
that's why I
anybody
was asking about therapy. I don't want to miss any more signs when people may need it.
in distress, yes.
And yeah, and
But just
since they
be
had this
there.
thing about therapy, I wanted to maybe think of some other alternatives as we can lead up to a therapist.
Well, there is.
Well, I
Let's,
was gonna say there's a lot of online. There's a lot of online. I mean, even though
yes.
it's therapy,
And
but
support
it's not
groups.
in the same vein. It's,
Hmm.
for those that may not want to, it could be like a quick dose, a short, something maybe short and sweet.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
You can, I don't really
I
have any
actually have a
on
resource
my
because I
head.
just started. There's not a
Okay,
plug for me
good.
though, but I did remember Rose, I just told you I started work. It's called Circles,
Yeah.
circlesup.com. It's online emotional support. I actually run a divorce group. I just started 2 weeks ago. So I facilitate, they have anxiety, they have people who grieve. So it's called
Mhm.
circlesup.com. They meet
Circles up.
circlesup.com.
Mhm.
Got it.
And so if anybody is listening to this and you are, need some just support, emotional support, contact circlesup.com, go online, sign up for sessions. You can do as many sessions as you want. Again, they have them on different things. I do divorce, and it's a way for people to just come and just share what they're going through.
Mhm.
And it is really helpful for a lot of people. So
That's
yeah,
good.
yeah. And then the
Mhm.
other thing is, and again, it's not a pub, but the next speaker that's going to talk about is one of my
It is.
colleagues who does mental health first aid. And what we teach people is to see the signs when people are in crisis before they get there. And
Mhm.
so we talk about trauma and what things to look for 4 weeks after somebody experienced trauma. What should you do? And how can you get them connected? And the biggest part of mental health first aid is connecting somebody to
Connecting.
professional help, connecting them to the Kims. So
Mhm.
that's what we teach people. Look for the signs. Here's the signs. And now it's time. Somebody's getting ready to get into stress. What do you do next?
Mhm.
So stay tuned,
Absolutely.
folks. We got a whole lot more. Kim, you have been great.
Thank you.
If anybody wanted to
Thank
know
you.
information about Kim, she's in private practice or she's
Yes.
starting her practice. So she's part of the group. Just reach out to Kim Quick. If you're looking
Yes,
for a therapist,
absolutely.
she's excellent. If you're dealing with some past trauma that repressed and you're not dealing with it, give Kim a call or reach out to her on Facebook.
Yep, absolutely. And what I'm going to do is I have a list of some books and some links to mental health supports. The ACEs quiz, if anybody wants to look at their
Yes,
ACEs.
can you put that in? Can you post that in a link? Can you put that? Does that go on
Yep.
Facebook?
You want me to put that on Facebook?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yes, so put that, write a whole post about that.
okay,
Add the resources there. So just post it in the group.
Perfect.
I want to take it as well. So
Okay.
everybody who didn't.
it's very interesting. I told you mine was an 8. It was like, ooh, wow.
Yeah, I'll be
Because
interested to
there's
see what mine is. So
so
yes,
much
please post
exposure.
that. Kim, you
All
are the
right.
best. Thank you so much.
Thank
Rosa, thank you.
you.
Always here. And we're going to post this. It's recorded. So I'm going to stop the recording right now. And then we're going to post this in a group. And I'm going to send you a copy too, Kim.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Wait, are we still live?
No, I stopped it.